But Horowitz is coming back again. Currently, he's working on a documentary about his life that will premiere in concert halls and theaters in November, and those who have heard him perform for this film say he is playing better now than in many, many years. Well, back in 1977, we filmed a rare profile of this extraordinary man.
When I'm on the stage, I'm one person. When I'm out of the stage, I'm another person.
When you're on the stage...
When I'm on the stage, I feel I'm a king. I'm a king.
On the stage?
Yes, nobody has to interfere with him because I have something to do and I have to bring the best which is in me. Sometimes I do it better, sometimes less good, like any human being.
They say that Horowitz's fingers can do anything on the keyboard impossible for others to do. Is this?
It's not true.
Not true.
It's just the opposite.
What do you mean?
I hear the others, I think they do something which I cannot do.
You're still learning. You're still...
All the time. All the time.
And you still want to prove to the people out there.
I prove to myself that I can do it. If I cannot do it, I will not be on the stage.
There are several things about a Horowitz concert that are unique. It's not just the music. They don't need paid advertising, and they will not accept mail orders. Why? Because a Horowitz concert regularly sells out at the box office just hours after it's announced.
Working off in the...
You worked enough?
Vladimir Horowitz has been performing since the age of 16. He was a huge success in Europe before coming to the United States. He has never known failure.
You should take one more bow.
Maybe.
Yes.
However, he has had his difficult years. He interrupted his career twice voluntarily. In 1953, he announced that he was depressed, tired of the pressures of touring, and that he was going to stop playing concerts for a while. It was 12 years before he played in public again. And then the rumors began.
And then the rumors began, I'm in a crazy house.
He's institutionalized, he's afraid of the piano.
Listen,
Horowitz has gone mad. How did the rumors start?
you see, America likes bad news. They don't like good news. The headlines are always bad news. You sell the paper. If it's a good news, you don't sell the paper.
Is there jealousy among top performers?
Yes.
There is.
Unfortunately, it is.
Are you jealous of anybody?
I was always happy to hear something above me. It always gave me inspiration. It always gave me some incentive to do something myself. If somebody gets more money, best luck, please.
You know, I really have to say, this is a really stand-up guy. I mean, didn't you just love that comment that he made about how he's not the least bit jealous of the young people coming up, and how he mentioned earlier that he likes it when, you know, younger pianists can come up and actually do it better than he can. It gives him something to shoot for, it gives him a new incentive. This is the mark of a real professional. This is the mark of somebody who is completely secure. I mean, the saying goes, the bigger they are, the nicer they are. And I think with Horowitz, that's what the case was. He was a very nice man and a total professional, and he looked at everything as a way of improving himself. He didn't feel like he was threatened by all the other young talent that was out there. He knew who he was. He knew that he was the greatest pianist of the 20th century. And he didn't really think that much of it. He just continuously looked upon it as a way of improving himself. I remember there was on the Travel Channel not too long ago a documentary about Wayne Newton and his career, and he made a comment that was, I thought, very telling, just like this one was, that when he first went on Jack Benny's show as a youngster, somebody asked Jack Benny whether or not he felt threatened by the fact that Wayne Newton, this kid, might show him up, might upstage him. And Jack Benny said, heavens no, my personal philosophy is that if some guest on my show isn't able to upstage me, I don't want him on my program. That's how secure Jack Benny was. That's how professional Jack Benny was, that he wanted real talent, and he wasn't threatened by it. As he said, if they can't do better than I am, I don't even want them on my program, because I only want the best. And that's what Vladimir Horowitz was about too, and so many of the professionals that I know are like that. I mean, it's just something that really warms my heart as a piano student when I hear professionals, especially world-class professionals like Vladimir Horowitz, talking that way. He was a real pro.
Also with him is his wife of 44 years, Wanda, daughter of the famed conductor Arturo Toscanini. To Horowitz, do you talk frankly when he plays well and when he plays not so well?
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, yes.
She does.
Yes.
She's not always right, but she talks.
No,
But
seriously.
most of the time I'm right.
Wanda is both companion and advisor, on tour and at home in their New York City townhouse.
The best thing for me to judge him is when I'm upstairs and he plays here in this living room. You can hear better because you don't see the personality of the artist. You just hear the sound.
In the 12 years that he didn't play,
Yeah.
in the 12 years
Yeah.
from 1953 to
I
65,
was in this room very happy.
you were in this room very happy.
Very happy.
And you, madame?
Not so happy.
But you stayed here.
Oh, yes, I did. You know what happened when he played fine in 1965?
What?
He came out, and there was a big line of people on both sides of Carnegie Hall, and somebody said, "Oh, Mr. Horowitz, we stood in line all night." And I said, "You know what? I stood in line for 12 years.
It must have been a difficult 12 years for you.
Yeah, because you see, from time to time he would say, "I will never play again." I said, "Fine, very fine."
You know, I think that that's my favorite part of this interview. These comments about Vladimir Horowitz's stage fright. It was absolutely, it was so horrible for him that he literally took 12 years off from the stage because that's how horrified he was of getting in front of an audience. I mean, I remember, you know, when I started out, I started sweating my recitals a whole 4 weeks before we even had to go on stage. That was the first year that I was taking lessons, and then the second year I think it was down to a week, and then the third year just the last couple of days, and then from that point forward it's just been the last day, on the day of the actual performance, that I get nervous. But you know, I know that I get stage fright. I don't know anybody who doesn't get stage fright. And it just really warmed me inside to hear him share this very, very personal and private story about his horrible, horrible stage fright and how it got to the point between 1953, the year I was born, and 1965, when he finally started performing again, that he was so horrified of being in front of an audience that he simply stopped performing for 12 full years. And then to hear Wanda say that, you know, it was okay with her, that even though the 12 years was difficult, you know, all she wanted was to do whatever was necessary for him to be happy. And so he's saying, you know, I'm going to quit piano. I don't want to be a pianist anymore. I don't want to play anymore. And she just kept saying, fine, fine. I mean, whatever you want, that's fine. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we all had a Wanda in our lives, somebody who was that supportive, who didn't care about what we might potentially be throwing away, just doing whatever is necessary to make us happy? Boy, that really would be great. I really envied him that he had such a wonderful and supporting wife. And I'm really grateful, not only for the world of piano, but for the whole world in general, that he finally got over his stage fright and started performing again. I know, I mean, even my own piano teacher, you know, gets stage fright from time to time. You know, my first piano teacher, Tim, I went to one of his concerts a couple of years ago. He was giving a St. Patty's Day concert over at one of the local sportsman's bars, and I remember him talking to his band members afterwards and saying, "Oh my God, I was just dying up there. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just completely petrified." Here's a guy who's been playing since he was 5 years old, and now he's 55, and he was petrified. But he kept playing, and from the point of view of me, as a member of the audience watching him, there was never a clue that Tim was having any problems at all. So, I wanted to share that with you because it was such a touching moment in the interview. But if you want to see an even more touching moment, watch what's coming up. What's coming up here is a very good illustration of why we do it, why performers get on stage. I think Vladimir Horowitz is going to say it now in a nutshell to sum it up for all of us. Watch this.
And you've been playing more concerts the last 2 years. Three.
Yeah.
Oh,
Than in
good.
years and years and years.
Oh,
Why?
yes.
Why?
Because I start to feel that I'm afraid to tell that.
What's that?
That the public enjoyed.
Of course the public.
See, the public enjoyed and they like me.
Isn't that just precious? Isn't that what this is all about? And did you just love seeing that twinkle in his eye and that modesty in his smile when he says, "I perform because the public likes me"? Well, the public didn't like him. The public adored him. Anyway, here is something that says it better than anything else. Watch what's coming now. Isn't this a great coda to end this?
You really love to play the piano, don't you, Maestro?
I
mean, you love to play the piano.
Oh, sure, oh, sure.
And you love to listen.
Century, and this may come as a surprise to you, classical music was the pop music of the day. It is what people lived for. And the piano industry was the largest manufacturing industry in the United States. Now, nobody would believe me when I tell them that. But it's true. There were 500,000 pianos being built every year. Population 120 million, so a lot of those were exported overseas to Europe and other countries. 500,000 pianos a year. Why? Because in the house, there was a house, then you had a parlor, and the parlor went to piano, and piano was home entertainment. There was no radio, no television. Any little kids in here? I'm sure that I saw a few. Raise your hands if you're under the age of 12. All right. Okay. Oh, thank you. Hard to believe there were no iPads, no iPhones, no TVs, no radios. In fact, there were no cars. So what you did was you bought a piano and you learned how to play it. And you stood around, whether it was the holidays or whatever, and you played music. And there were hundreds of manufacturers. If you saw Pierce Piano Atlas, it's this thick. There are thousands of different name brand pianos that were built. 500,000 pianos a year. Last year in the United States, there were not 2,500 pianos built. That's how small our industry is today. So we're here to celebrate great music. Now, part of that, we say, and there's also 400, 500,000, 300,000 being built in China right now, just for the Chinese population. So it's pretty amazing. All right, next slide. Vladimir Horowitz. Vladimir Horowitz was born in Kiev, which I think my latest geography is correct. That's in the Ukraine. what we would call the Ukraine today. Born in 1903, entered Kiev, spelled wrong, conservatory at age 9. That was me when I did that. Began his career in Russia at age 17, and for those of you that are young, and there are a few here, he actually never got paid in money. He got paid in bread, butter, and chocolate rather than money, because it was during the Russian Revolution. And if you're under the age of 17, that's better than money anyway, isn't it? All right. In 1925, Vladimir Horowitz crossed over the Russian border to study with Arthur Schnabel, the great musician, teacher of the day, and he knew he was never going to come back. So in those days, they called that defecting. All right, and then he went to Europe, and he went through the Blücher factory and the Bosendorfer and Bechstein factories, and he finally went through the Steiner factory in Hamburg, Germany, which is an American factory. And he chose the Steinway piano to play for the rest of his life. And he never played another piano. And, well, that's not surprising, because 97% of the pianists who stepped on the stage last year to perform with every symphony would only play on the Steinway piano by choice. He also made recordings, not in a recording studio, but on a wealthy player pianos that made the rolls. And the first recording he did, the big recording, was the Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 2 in London in 1930. Horowitz came to the United States for the first time on Christmas Eve of 1927. He took the SS Hamburg to New York City, where he made his New York debut at Carnegie Hall. Not to great reviews, but to much later great reviews. He and the conductor had a little problem communicating. In 1927, Steinway and Sons signed him as a Steinway artist. You're going to hear a Steinway artist tonight, and I'll talk a little bit about that. In 1928, he made his first gramophone recording for RCA Victor, and in 1933, he played with Arturo Toscanini and the NBC Orchestra. Now, anybody that is older than me will remember that, because I don't, remember that Arturo Toscanini in those days, when you wanted to hear great music, you turned on your radio. And an NBC Orchestra would play, and Vladimir Horowitz would be one of those pianists. So you sat around your radio, and you listened. Life was so much simpler then, okay? His recordings. Horowitz became well known for many of his recordings. Oftentimes, his recordings became the ultimate reading of a particular piece of literature. Sometimes so much so that other musicians didn't like recording it because they would be compared to. For many years, he did that. During this time, he focused on recording, and he often recorded in his New York townhouse and used this instrument to do it. I'll tell you a little bit about this piano in a minute. And in 1968, he made a live television debut with the Carnegie Hall concert, broadcast by CBS television, and one of the big ratings of that year. And he won 7 Grammy Awards for his best classical albums. In his later years, in 1986, he got the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Ronald Reagan. He also, in that year, announced he would return to Russia to perform for the first time in 61 years. And he continued performing and playing for the next 2 years, and then went back into one of his retirement periods in his life. Horowitz, by the way, was really deathly afraid of playing in public. I'm sure you know that. He had to be hypnotized a lot of times. So I'm going to tell you my personal story. In 1985, was the year that I take that back. In 1980, Horowitz played for, I think, the 12th or 13th time at Hill Auditorium. He liked Hill Auditorium because he always said, I get 80% of the gate. That was a lot of money for a classical pianist. So, in 1980, I was just became a Steinway dude, and I was raised in the jazz world. And I knew who Vladimir Horowitz was, certainly, but I did not understand the magnitude of this artist. So I drove out, it was Sunday morning, I opened up the paper and I'm reading the article in the Detroit News Free Press. actually the Detroit Free Press back then, and reading the article about Horowitz performing at Hill Auditorium. And I said, oh, I gotta go meet this guy. So I got my car. It was a Firebird. My hair was a little bit longer. And I walked to Hill Auditorium about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, knocked on the back door. Security guard came and said, can I help you? And I said, yes, I'm here to see Mr. Horowitz. Right. Okay. So, he asked me why, and I told him I was with Steinway. I wanted to check the piano and make sure everything was okay, which was not unusual for Steinway dealers to do that, just unusual if they were Vladimir Horowitz. So, somebody else came to the door, and then another person came to the door. But I was very persistent. I said, I want to meet Mr. Horowitz. That's not going to be possible. And I said, then at least let me look at the piano, make sure everything is okay. And that's when I met Franz Moore for the first time, who was tuning Mr. Horowitz's piano on stage that day. So I met him, we were talking, he just finished, and I touched the piano, and I thought that was really cool. And I said, I'd really like to meet Mr. Horowitz. And so Franz said, I don't know, I go, And so he took me in the room and he said, Maestro, I would like to introduce you to Tim Hoy. He is with Steinway & Son. Oh, how do you do? We sat and talked for about 20 minutes. It was really kind of cool, and I still didn't really understand who he was. And then he said, are you going to stay for my concert? It wasn't like that. It was one of you, stay for my concert. I do a terrible Russian accent, sorry. And I said, I would like to, but apparently you're really, really popular, and nobody ever even gets an announcement of this. They just buy the tickets before you even start. So I don't have a ticket. And he said, oh, well, you sit with Wanda, which was his wife. So here I am, in my front row seat, which I didn't buy a ticket for, which I thought was really cool, because I didn't know what this really was going to be. And I sat in the front row seat and with Wanda and the doctor and Franz Moore, the tuner, and the cook, and there was just a whole slew of people over there. And I'm sitting there, and he came out on stage, and he started to perform, and I was mesmerized. And about right towards the end of it, he began to play the little, almost childlike piece, Trummerai. And I started getting this horrifying feeling that something was wrong with me, like it was dizzy, and my eyes started watering, and I was fighting this feeling. And I had never experienced this feeling before, and I suddenly realized I think I was going to start to cry. And it was terrible. I mean, I was terribly embarrassed. And I turned around to look, and the streaming arms were everywhere. Everywhere. And if you ever watch the Horowitz in Moscow video, which I recommend to everybody, you will see all those staunch Russian men fighting off those tears and losing tears streaming down people's eyes. And that's when I suddenly realized something that was so important. There's great musicians, there are great technicians, but there are very few great artists. And artists have the ability to communicate with their audience in a way that nobody else could. All right, so enough of that. He married Wanda, who was Arturo Toscanini's daughter, in 1933. And they had one daughter, Sonia, and they took up permanent residence and became citizens in 1944. He was a shy, as we said. But also extremely colorful, because there's children here, I can't tell you those things. Horowitz has left us with about 70 albums and CDs, 7 videos, 4 documentaries, and his passionate playing brought flocks of listeners to his concerts. And he became, what most importantly was, the face of great classical piano. So for whatever you can say about Vladimir Horowitz, if you were a great pianist, and sometimes he was criticized because he was, I think partially because of his popularity, but he put a face on classical piano that was so incredible, and he had such a popular demand from his audiences, and it changed the way people thought about classical music and it kept it alive. Today we have a few artists like that today that are very young, attracting very large crowds, and we think that's incredibly important. Today, 97% of the concert pianists who perform play on Steinway, which is pretty amazing since there's 21 manufacturers of 9-foot concert grands. So last year, in front of every symphony in the US, I can't remember the exact numbers, but there were 19 piano manufacturers fighting for the endorsement of 2 people. Because those are the only 2 that didn't play on the Steinway Sons piano. Why? Because as Horowitz says, I love the projection and the power of the Steinway and the clarity and brilliance of its treble and sonorous virile bass.
Hi, this is Mike, and it is Tuesday afternoon, June the 10th, 2014, and I'm here at Steinway Gallery in Commerce Township. This is actually the Steinway Gallery in Detroit, and I have been given the privilege of playing what is maybe the most famous piano in the world. This is the Vladimir Horowitz Steinway that he used in his private home all the way up until the time he died. Built in 1941, but rebuilt in the 80s when he decided to go into retirement and do recordings in his home. So what I'm going to do now is perform my National Piano Guild repertoire. I just completed B-level intermediate at the auditions a few weeks ago. What we do for the Piano Guild is we play a piece from each of the 4 periods of piano music, which are the Baroque, the Classical, the Romantic, and the Contemporary. So this first piece is Bach. He was the principal composer for the Baroque period, which ran from roughly around 1750 to about 1820. And this is Bach's Prelude in F major. I think that's the best I've done the Bach piece. The classical piece is the Sonatina No. 3 by Muzio Clementi. Muzio Clementi was one of the foremost composers and educators of his generation. He was a contemporary Beethoven and Mozart. And even though he didn't have quite the composition and performance reputation of Beethoven and Mozart, he was still very highly regarded, but he was considered to be the best educator of his generation. And he wrote teaching pieces that were so good that even Beethoven and Mozart borrowed them to teach their own students. So this is one of his most popular teaching pieces, the Third Sonatina, and this is what I will be playing. All three movements. All right. Enough of this nonsense. Look, that was a performance by a professional concert pianist. I am not a professional concert pianist. I am an intermediate student, an adult intermediate student. So I am playing like an adult intermediate student. Now, one thing that they ask you to do when you're preparing for this competition is to play at a tempo that you can keep control with, you know. They don't want you to play it faster than you can play it well, because then they can't judge you on it. So yeah, I'm playing everything slower than it's supposed to be, because even after a whole year of practice, I still wasn't able to get my tempo to the point where it was supposed to be and still keep it in control. The judges far prefer for you to keep control and play it correctly than to play it at a higher tempo. So that's what I'm doing. I'm playing the best I can. I started playing, I started my lessons when I was 54 years old. I'm 61 years old now, so I've been playing for 7 years. My teacher follows the guild, the curriculum of the National Piano Guild, and which is based out of Houston, Texas. And what they have are they have 6 courses at the elementary level, 6 courses at the intermediate level, 4 for college prep or high school, and then 4 collegiate courses. They even have a 21st course, which is the equivalent of a master's degree course, and that's what they call their artist certificate course. I am currently working on my 3rd course at the intermediate, in the intermediate curriculum. So the 3rd out of 6 courses in the intermediate curriculum. It took me roughly about 2 or 3 years to get through the elementary curriculum, and I have been working steadily through the intermediate curriculum since then. So I've completed roughly I've completed 8 courses in 6 years, and during this 7th year, I've been working on the 8th course. I do go for my next guild competition next month, and that's where I will be competing at the 3rd level intermediate of the 6 levels. So that's where I am playing at, so that's what you need to be keeping in mind as you're watching this. I am not yet a professional. I am an intermediate adult student, and that is how I am playing these pieces. So, with that, let's return to the recital at Steinway Gallery. It's a hard one to get through without messing up parts of it anyway. Now, the Romantic period runs somewhere between 1830 and 1890. The Romantic period is the period where composers, after people like Mozart and Beethoven had expanded the technical capabilities of piano and shown the world just exactly what the outer limits of this piano, this instrument, this new instrument was capable of. The Romantic composers decided to take all that technique and tell stories with it and do things that had a lot of passion and a lot of feeling to them. And that's the reason why it's called the Romantic period. So Stephen Heller is the composer, and this is the Avalanche. Probably the best I've ever played that.
That's really good.
Okay, now we get to the contemporary period. The contemporary period is anything from 1890 on, which means that heavy metal and rap and all this other stuff is all considered part of the contemporary period. And believe it or not, everything from rock and roll to heavy metal all came from classical music. Classical music basically was the root of soul. Soul turned into blues. Blues turned into jazz. So all of these forms of music built on every form that went before it. And but as far as the piano field goes, though, we concentrate almost exclusively on everything between 1890 and 1920. I'm not exactly sure when the Russian composer Dmitri Kabalevsky composed this piece, but it is his Sonatina, Opus 27, number 11. And this is Kabalevsky, the contemporary period. There's one section that I always mess up a little bit, and I've been doing that for a year now. It doesn't matter how much section work I do on it, I can get it perfect in practice, but when I actually perform it the next time, I'm beginning to end, I still mess it up. Except during Guild, I got the parts that I had done the section work on okay, and the parts that had been easy for me all year, I suddenly messed up. But anyways, that is my Guild program for 2014.
It's a pleasure to be here and play for you tonight. I just wanted to say a few words about the program and my own experience with Vladimir Horowitz. I never really had a chance to meet him, unfortunately, but it was a great inspiration. I remember when I was a young teenager listening to some of his recordings, and back then in Poland it was impossible to buy any records. There was no CDs at that time yet. So I had to listen on the radio to his performances. And at some point he said something interesting about music and performance. He said that we all play the same notes, but it's the time, the space between notes that we do differently. And that's how we recognize Horowitz.